I'm on mute. Good evening, everyone. My name is Chloe Tetro, and I'm the health coach here with Ready Care. And lovely to have the webinar with you tonight. Beverly, I can see straight in the comments there you are. So you have a message for Andy, and you're making stews. That's absolutely brilliant because I know it is getting a little bit colder. So to answer your question, yes, there'll be a few more recipes coming up in the next few weeks. So that will be going out to you. So this evening, guys, I will be chatting to you through a topic that comes up quite a bit in sessions in one way or another, and that is the topic of cognitive distortions. So some of you guys might already know about cognitive distortions and what's involved in them. But for those of you that don't, what I might do this evening is just give a brief overview as to what they are, how they can show up, especially when you're looking to make a little bit of a lifestyle and dietary change. So kind of running through them, and we'll finish up with an exercise or two that could be a little bit helpful to have a look at those. So cognitive distortions, what are they and how do they come about? So excuse me. So I would have chatted a little bit in the past about the makeup of the brain, and how when we begin our life, we take on loads and loads of information, and gradually we go through our life and we cut away the information that we think may not particularly be useful to us, or if we make an association with an emotional impact, generally speaking, that connection is fortified in our brain. So what can happen there is we start to tell ourselves stories based on our experiences from a very young age. So they could be, most of the time, they're kind of caught up around something that we found upsetting. And we tend to store those a little bit harder than we do the ones that are just your run-of-the-mill happy experiences. And that might seem unfair, but basically what's happening there is your brain has registered that as a threat, and it can't really differentiate between what's an emotional threat, a physical threat, or a psychological threat. So it all gets lumped into one, and it goes, oof, do you remember that time we felt bad? We're going to store that up here forever. So what can tend to happen is sometimes the brain tries to simplify all of the information that it gets into kind of bite-sized pieces. So the analogy that I tend to give, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to have thought of that, but I find it a very good analogy, is when you go out into a new landscape and you're given a little map drawn on your hand or on a tissue. So it's enough for you to navigate the landscape. You know basically the terrain, you know how to get around, but you're missing so much information from that little template. And unfortunately, a lot of the way that our brain works is by oversimplified templates. It really, really tries to help us by getting to the crux of things. So that kind of covers what it is, why they happen, how they tend to show up then in our life is in lots of variety of different ways. They can come up, and actually I've spoken to the first one. I'll pop over to the first one here. So black and white, all or nothing. I've kind of gone into a great bit of detail with that in a previous webinar, only because it's the one that when I'm chatting to people tends to come up the most. It's that all in or absolutely no, we've fallen off the horse, we're not getting back on the horse. It's that kind of false dichotomy of there can only be 100% of something or 0% of something. And a lot of people would express themselves as almost a badge of honor, saying, you know, they're a very all or nothing person. But what that can do is set yourself up for this kind of unattainable perfection, which is the all. And if you fall short of that, you tend to place yourself in the nothing bracket. So you can kind of see how adopting that way of thinking, which is very easy. It's one of the most simplistic ways of thinking that we have about anything. It's on, off, black, white, 1, 2, split down the middle. But unfortunately, that can lead to quite a number of difficulties, especially when people are undertaking new lifestyle and dietary changes. It can kind of show up in a way that you might have an off day and all of a sudden, poof, It's all gone. Everything's gone. We're in the nothing pile. Um, but we'll have a chat about what we can do about those. I'll just run through them quickly now. Mind reading. Oh God, I used to be murdered for this when I was younger. Mind reading is jumping to conclusions, and it's basically, God, they're going to think that I'm X, Y, and Z. I don't know who can resonate to this, but I definitely would have fallen into that bracket. I'd say on a bad day now, I'd still fall into that bracket. But basically, it's that discomfort and that rumination of doing somebody else's thinking for them. Showing up and maybe having an awkward moment and leaving work or the party or the exchange and going, God, they're going to think I'm this and that and the other thing and this and that. And really, like the best way that I've heard this described before is, and it sounds very cruel, but actually it's I found it a good reminder, is mind your own business, insofar as whatever somebody else thinks of you is their business. You have no control over it. You're going to absolutely exhaust yourself trying to catch up and keep tabs on how somebody else is feeling about you. And it's a total drain. It's a total drain on the energy. And this is something that you'll find with all of these cognitive distortions, is the more energy we give them, the more tired we tend to feel, the more sad we tend to feel, the more overwhelmed, stressed that we tend to feel. And those all impact us and our experience of our day and of our world, and how a day could have, gone, had we not been ruminating on things, we could have had quite a positive day. But these thinking errors can really kind of place us in a negative field of experience. Personalization is quite similar, and it's basically thinking error where something happens and your initial thought is, that must have happened because of me. And it comes from a theory called the locus of control, which basically states that you can have an interior locus of control or an exterior locus of control. And sometimes, especially in our young lives, when we sometimes are put in scenarios that are disruptive or turbulent, it's safer for a small child to believe that actually it's my fault, I'm the problem, because they regain that little bit of control. They regain that thought process of, if it's my fault and not the environment, maybe I can do something to change it. And unfortunately, that can really stick into our adult life. The more we think a specific set of patterns, the more ingrained they become. So even though something might have served you as a child to think in a specific way to keep you safe, as an adult, the more we repeat specific patterns, the more ingrained that they get. So you might find yourself as an adult having some of these distortions and knowing they're not particularly where you want to be at with your thinking, but finding it quite difficult to break out of them. This is one that comes up so much, and I don't know, unless you're a very, very zen, very mindful person, I don't know anyone who doesn't fall into these must, should, and need. So why are they thinking errors? So in the language that we use, the language is very powerful because our brain is a mechanism of association. So we make an association with a particular word and the brain glues it to a scenario that reminds it of it. So when we say things like, mea culpa here, I'm one of these people sometimes, I have to say, I must go to the gym, or I should go to the gym, or I need to go to the gym. All of those have quite an oppressive type of association. It's something that is forced on you to do. Now, there are certain things in life that we must do, we should do, we need to do. But when it comes to looking at setting yourself targets and goals that are moving you in the direction that you've chosen to go down, you may have chosen to implement specific lifestyle dietary changes, hobby changes, whatever they might be. So using the language of must, should, and need associated with that activity is going to basically create a barrier with you and that activity of anything that you must, should, and need to do is going to be met with the association of automatically, oh, I don't want to do that. Don't tell me what to do, even if you're the person telling yourself to do something. So a really good trick And this is an easy fix for any of you that are into neurolinguistic programming, or just even having a look at the types of words that one uses. A very good swap out for those is I get to, or I want to, or I choose to. So I get to go to the gym, which, has an element of gratitude in there as well. Not everybody does get to go to the gym, even if you have to drag yourself there some days. I want to, because you've basically started a pact with yourself. At some point, you really wanted to do this thing. If you need to review that, that's fine. But if it's something you genuinely want to do, reminding yourself that it's something you want to do, or I choose to. I could go to the gym. I don't have to go to the gym. I choose to go to the gym, or you might not. It's entirely up to you. But basically, it's taking that language of that type of oppressive feel and changing it to putting yourself back in the control seat, putting yourself in the seat of that external versus internal locus of control. So that's kind of the ones that is easiest to recognize. And if you have somebody else that you are comfortable talking about this to, you could. This is how I started to do it. I have a friend of mine that I said, for the next week now, if you heard me say I should, I must, I need to, will you just mirror that back to me? Because it's easier to hear it from the other side always. So if there's somebody that you're comfortable doing that with, and you find yourself kind of trudging through something that you initially willingly signed up for as a contract, let's say, do ball hop with them on that, because you'd be surprised how often you say it and how a very simple change in language. Oh, brilliant, Beverly. So this is amazing. I've only recently started to be able to say no to people that, want me to do things. That's absolutely brilliant. I'm delighted you're getting something from this. Fantastic. So negative bias. Negative bias is basically when something happens and we only remember the bad. So if you remember what I mentioned about the brain, how it's trying to protect us and how it's trying to basically store anything that could potentially become a threat down the line. It's going to really fuse that into our memory. So what we tend to lean slightly towards is negative bias. That is, you could have had 9 positive feedbacks and 1 negative feedback. And what the brain will tend to do, and I'm sure we've all been guilty of it at some point, is to ruminate on that one of, oh God, what did I do wrong? And this and that and the other thing. And to be very, very conscious of what that negative cognitive bias is doing to your felt experience. I'm a great proponent of all that we do. The experience that we have is really crucial to this. So we can have the day fall into rumination, or we can have the day go into a space where we have a positive experience of it. So there is a natural human inclination towards negative bias. So to recognize that and to really take that thought as it arises and go, okay, is that thing Chloe mentioned now? Am I falling into that trap? Overgeneralization. I'll never be able to do this. It's a close cousin of the all or nothing. All gym plans are rubbish would be another example. But you might have had one bad experience of a gym plan that maybe didn't suit you at the time that you were doing it, or maybe it was poorly tailored. But basically, it's basing a single. It's basing no, the other way around, Chloe. It's taking a single point of reference and applying it to everything else that is like it. Which is very, very reductive and will close yourself off from lots of different experiences. Now, we only have our bank of previous experiences to really rely on as human beings navigating the world. So there is a tendency to utilize what we do know as a crutch going forward sometimes, and to really reduce our experiences down to a single experience. I think I used this I used this example before. I found it in when I was studying, and it was, if you lend money to a friend and that friend doesn't pay you back, Your overgeneralization could be, I can't trust my friends with paying me back money. And it's very insidious. Like those things, those cognitive distortions can really come in if we don't check ourselves quite often. So it's important to do that. Magnify, minimize, big one for lifestyle dietary changes. So I hear this a lot in sessions where I could pick up the phone or go on the Zoom call and I'll say, how was your week? And they'll say, oh, terrible. It was awful. I was great now 6 days out of the 7, but this morning now I broke out and I had a slice of bread or something. Do you know that kind of way where you say, okay, perfect. So you had, how many meals was that? So you had 3 meals a day over 6 days. Brilliant. And then you had 1 out of your 7. So we have, gosh, my maths here, 21. You had 1 meal out of 21 that was maybe a little bit off plan. So absolutely brilliant. You had 20 that were. So you can see there that it's absolutely minimizing all of the really positive efforts that was made. And when something goes a little bit askew, all of a sudden it's gigantic, terrible, the week was awful. But it's a very natural human tendency. So it's just recognizing that we have those types of pitfalls, and just even awareness will really help with this. I don't have that many more to go through, don't worry. It's not a forever exhaustive list. Fortune telling is like mind reading, but for yourself. So if you begin a program and let's say week 6, you're really struggling, and your experiences, so we're having a look at negative bias now, your previous experiences of doing a program where, oh yeah, I was great now up until week 6, and when I started to struggle at week 6, it all went out the window. So I'd say I'm going to fail totally at this one as well. So already you're priming yourself with all of these emotional associations. You're thinking of a time that you weren't able to complete something, and what does that bring up usually? That can bring up shame, guilt, regret, sadness, maybe being a bit cross at ourselves. So all of these emotions start to trigger all of these physical sensation, physiological effects. You might create more cortisol. And what does cortisol do? Cortisol is going to bring up your stress levels and create more difficulty in thinking clearly. So nothing different has happened. You're doing absolutely brilliant along your program, and all of a sudden you have this huge flood in your system of shame, guilt, feeling not good about yourself, feeling like, oh gosh, and your thinking is a little bit skewed because you're a little bit stressed, and all of a sudden your triggers, which you may or may not know, they could be triggers of stress, they could be triggers of shame, they could be triggers of all of the different things I've mentioned. They're getting very, very peaked, and you're kind of going, oh God, I feel awful. And you might go to whatever that previous habit that brought you that level of comfort, you might go straight back to that. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And just to be very, very mindful of that. Now, what I love about fortune telling, first of all, when you point it out, most people are quite receptive, that they're going, oh yeah, I have no idea what's going to happen in the future. But the other thing is that the inverse of that works really, really well. So in the same way that how we think rushes us physiologically negatively, it can also do so incredibly positively. So just have a think and go, what would be the best outcome? What would be the best case scenario? And it's not just whimsy. This is why athletes run through things. They go through visualizations first, and really you're priming your system for a physiological response that's going to be very positive. So in that way, fortune telling, negative bias, not so good. Positive bias, really setting yourself up for success. Comparison, again, I think people are getting a lot better at picking that up, because it's more in the cultural psyche, I think, with social media backlash, to be very careful of the level of comparisons that we make to ourselves and each other. Thankfully, it's become part of the lingo nowadays to what's that everybody says, something like, yeah, everybody has their own path, or Whatever ladder somebody else might be climbing, you're on your own ladder, and it's one step at a time. Not to be looking at how somebody else is doing, because other than walking their shoes, we have no idea of the context. We have no idea of people's struggles, backstories. Comparison is again going to flood your system with not feeling good enough. And really, it has very little basis, because again, everybody is on their own track. We have no idea what's going on in other people's lives. And it is absolutely, it's, if you catch yourself doing it, go, whoop, nope, back on track, back on my own track. Catastrophizing, again, I'm going to make a total hames of this. Nothing, the worst case scenario, sometimes comically so, that sort of way. The absolute worst is going to happen. And again, I think sometimes if you have a buddy, a pal of yours, a partner, or anything like that, if you are resonating with any of these in particular, just maybe reach out to that person and say, hey, I was at a webinar the other day, and I'm just wondering if I could check accountability with you, because I think I might do this thing. And if they do notice it, that they really reach out and say, oh, you're doing that thing now, and no big deal made of something. It's just to have on in awareness. Labeling, again, will be something like, I'm no good, I'm terrible, I'm a loser, I'm so bad. And bad is one I get a lot, actually, which is unfortunate. It's unfortunate to hear that when you wish the best for somebody, because when we label ourselves in a certain way, the emotional response is more likely to create a behavioral response. The way that I would tend to talk about this is, picture yourself as a small kid, because really we're all just small kids operating adult bodies. Think of yourself as a small kid and think about how you would feel, or how that small child would feel. And if it's difficult with yourself, just think of a small kid that might be in your life, and think about how they would feel and how they would behave if they were consistently labeled as bad, lazy, no good, stupid, XYZ. And oftentimes children start to, first of all, it's exceedingly upsetting for the experience that you're having day by day. But children and adults tend to behave in a way that is, when we are upset, when we're dysregulated, we look for the things that bring us regulation. And oftentimes those can coincide with negative habits that we've picked up along the way. So nail biting, smoking, alcohol, food, binge watching, doom scrolling, all of those kind of things. So if you can just experiment with being compassionate, if you find yourself talking in those ways to yourself, which brings me on to emotional reasoning. Is very, very similar. Emotional reasoning is basically applying how you feel to something. This is the last one. This is the last one I will say. It's how you feel equals what the situation is. So let's think of an example. Okay, going into a job interview, I feel really nervous, unprepared. I feel like I'm not going to get this job. Right? So you do an interview, and it's a run-of-the-mill interview, and because you feel bad leaving, you're like, no, that's it. I've totally made a mess of that. I'm never going to get it. Or I feel like this person was mad at me. No, they've not given you particular reason, but because you feel, you're more likely to react in that way. A good way is usually just to ask, is this how I'm perceiving the situation? This is the story I'm telling myself about the situation, and just do a quick reality check. And if you're in a comfortable environment with people that you trust, most of the time, it's a very, very easy fix. And it's a good habit to get into, to actually just reality check when you can feel yourself, because that's often how it happens. You have your initial thought. Your thought triggers an emotion, because all of our brain is an associative pathway. There's no such thing as a cut and dry, this is my blurry hand here. There's no such thing as a cut and dry emotional center thought center. All of it is association. They all trigger each other. So it's a very good way to just reality check on that. So first exercise that I'll give, if for those of you that are interested, that are resonating with a few of those, is pop 5 minutes on your phone every day around the same time that you can dedicate 5 minutes to. 5. And in those 5 minutes, what you do is do something akin to meditation, insofar as what you want to do is close your eyes, and you're going in here with a bit of curiosity. You're going to check what your ruminating thoughts are. So close your eyes, and if a thought comes up, label the thought. So work, or I'm ruminating on something in the future. Okay, so label that thought. Label that thought. And when you're done after your 5 minutes, just jot down what's coming up for you. After a few days, you'll start to see a specific pattern. So you'll be able to see, gosh, I'm really labeling myself as bad because I wasn't able to, I'll continue with my gym analogy, priming myself for going to the gym after this. I'm really bad because I keep labeling myself as lazy for not going to the gym. And it's come up a few times a day, and it definitely makes me feel bad. And the more I feel bad, the more I actually just want to stay on my bed and watch Netflix. So you start to recognize some of your patterns in that. You're going to get a much clearer idea of what it is that is going around unnoticed in your head, what it is that you're not really giving yourself the space to detach from and engage with on a level that might be a little bit more positive. Now, remember, none of these thoughts are your fault per se. If there's a hard wiring that's happened over an amount of years, it is much more difficult to not think a certain way. I would say, instead of telling yourself not to think of a thing, replace it with something else. So continuing with the example, I am not bad because I'm not going to the gym. I'm not lazy because I'm not going to the gym. Say, maybe I need more rest. Maybe I just need to offer myself more rest this week. Or maybe I need to change the schedule so that it's not at the end of the day. So you're starting to play around with a level of curiosity, looking at what it is that is ruminating. Chatting to the friend as well, somebody that you trust, to say, look, I'm resonating with labeling. Can you just be on the lookout maybe for the week to see if it's something that I do tend to do. Exercise number 2 is actually from a question that I received, which is somewhat related, and it's basically looking at refocusing. So this was a lady who struggled with the black and white all or nothing, and said she found it incredibly difficult to go back to the headspace of being on it when she fell off the wagon, as she put it. And she explained that this was something that she saw quite a lot in her life, where she would start something, finish, and start something, it would be interrupted, and she'd have difficulty finishing the task on hand. For those of you that have had those types of experiences, and to be honest, it's something I do hear quite often, which is why I wanted to bring it to you guys this evening. There is a tried and tested method on this, which is basically do a timer of a minute. I started with 30 seconds because my focus definitely needed exercising as well. Do a timer of 30 seconds and fix a spot on the wall. And for those 30 seconds, tell yourself the object of the exercise is to keep looking at that spot. If you look away, look back. Don't beat yourself up. Just go, I'll just look back. So basically, we've trained our brains to do the opposite, that if we fall off, if we're in that all or nothing, that's it, the exercise is ruined. I'm going to start labeling myself. I'll start catastrophizing, emotional reasoning. Really what you want to retrain is, okay, something happened. Let's go back. We have another 25 seconds on the clock. Let's go back. Which is actually a really nice exercise to start bringing in for those of you that have kind of mentioned that there is that focus piece. So that's it. That's kind of my lot. I thought I would run through these much quicker, but I'm actually much more of a blabber. So that my what I'd like to finish on with you guys is basically how you choose to experience your day. Experiences happen, or sorry, I should say, things happen in life. You know, we get thrown curveballs. We have somebody cut us off in traffic. Somebody be rude to us, and we cannot really control a lot of the external stuff that happens. We can control up to a point. With practice, it gets much, much easier how we choose to respond to things. So, looking at some of the cognitive distortions of this evening, if you are finding yourself one, two, or three of them are resonating, a lot of those can really get in the way of a positive experience. And if you can have a good experience of a day or a bad experience of a day, I'm a great proponent for let's have a good experience of it. So it's about practice, it's about awareness, but it does absolutely become easier. If you guys have any questions, I'm running a little bit over because I'm a chatty watty. If you have any questions, please pop them in the comment section. I'll give a few seconds there, and if not, Andrew will be back to you guys next week. If you have any questions on any of the things that I spoke about this evening, or if you'd like more information, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And otherwise, no, I think that's us for the evening. No questions so far, which is great. So I'll chat to you guys again, and Andrew will be back next week. Have a lovely evening. Bye.